140 coaching leads in 5 days, completely from scratch, no email list. And I'm going to show you exactly how you can implement that in your own coaching business going forward as well. So my name is Abesh, and I essentially help other ecom coaches scale their coaching program to 50 to 100K per month plus going forward. So without further ado, let's get straight right into the video. So how you can ultimately implement this is via organic content, paid ads, qualified pipeline, and a high ticket close, which I will obviously explain in a bit. So there are a couple of components that you need to kind of leverage when you're doing this as well. The first one being the top of funnel content, right? There are 4 traffic sources there that is ultimately going to help you, right? Of course, there's going to be LinkedIn, there's Twitter, but what has worked for me based off my experience, these 4 are predominantly the main things. I would say more so Instagram, YouTube, and ads. TikTok is pretty good. However, in terms of the lead quality from TikTok, it's not as great as, YouTube, IG, or ads, but it still works, right? It still converts as well. Okay. So the main thing that you ultimately have to factor in the top of funnel is grabbing the attention. And what really helps with that is obviously the ads alongside the organic as well. Okay. So what does all these 4 do? It just grabs the attention of your dream followers, which is going to have your ICPs within it as well. Okay. So this is ultimately very important, right? You need to be creating content that ultimately resonates with your audience, right? You need to be making content that ultimately fix the pain points, it handles the objections of your audience as well. Okay. So not every top of funnel content is gonna ultimately hit that, right? Because you want to make sure that your top of funnel content, it just makes people seem that you're authentic, you're genuine, and in return, they're gonna like you, they're gonna trust you, and more so out of the case, they will ultimately buy from you if those are ultimately the things, okay? When they do watch your either short form content or long form content as well. So this can be like reels, this can be YouTube long form content, but either way, these 4 traffic sources are amazing that will ultimately get you more attention that later down the line they will get converted once they are in your ecosystem. So once you have dialed in on your top of funnel content, then they will either engage with you, they will either follow you, and they will either comment on you. And once they do that, they are pretty much in your ecosystem. So ultimately, they are going to be a warm lead, right? If they do follow you, or if they do comment, or if they're just having an active conversation in the middle of funnel content, right? So how can you ultimately keep these individuals warm, right? Is via the lead mechanism. Okay, so you can utilize retargeting ads, you can have VSLs, right? Webinars, email sequences, and DM conversion. Okay, now these are where like appointment setters comes in. You can also use AI as well. Completely up to you. If they do the job, then great, right? But there's a sole purpose of this, and it's ultimately to nurture your current prospects. Okay, because at one point, like they will ultimately be hot, right? But it is your job to keep them warm and to keep nurturing them. And these are the 4 main things that will ultimately help you do that. Okay. And VSLs is very good, right? Because that is ultimately like a mini webinar, right? A webinar is a full webinar, and a VSL is like a mini webinar, right? And the main thing that most people get wrong is they think the webinar does the selling. However, it's actually the nurturing before the webinar that does the selling. So that is why middle of funnel content is where the magic happens, right? This is where they will either get disqualified or they will remain qualified and they will be converted onto a hot bottom of funnel, which we'll get onto in a bit. Okay. So you have to make sure that you are constantly retargeting the specific individuals, right? In the webinar as well, you are constantly nurturing them prior to them even getting on the webinar, right? Get them added onto like either a Telegram group or a WhatsApp group where the offer owner, right, is just constantly sending value, sending voice notes, sending videos, just ultimately as much nurturing as they can, okay, prior to them getting on the webinar. Email sequence is also very effective as well, right? Constantly applying pressure, value over the email as well. Basically, the more touch points that you have, the better. And of course, like not every single individual will open their emails, but if you are sending like 1 to 2 emails per day, right, a valued email, then they will most likely kind of see it as well, right? And not only from the emails, if you're targeting them from the setter, from the VSL, from the retargeting ads, then they are going to be even more warmer, right? So once you have ultimately nurtured them, right, then this is where the leads get generated, right? 140 for myself. So after the middle of funnel content, they get transitioned onto the bottom of funnel content. And this is where the sales mechanism happens. And this is where the prospects are predominantly very hot. Okay. So applications forms, when they fill out their questionnaires, right? And if they're qualified, they will continue to jump on the sales call. If they're not qualified, they will most likely be given like either a free resource or get sent to the free community as an example, just so, individuals can ultimately be nurtured in the near future. If it was like a financial issue, then they can always come at a later time as well. So offer doc as well. This is where the closer is ultimately, jumping on the sales call with the prospect and just trying to find out the discovery, the situation, like if this offer is even the right fit for them, how they can help them, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so once the sales call goes to plan, right, they get onboarded. If it's a no-show, right, they get followed up, right, they get sent to the free community, same again, right, constantly being nurtured, right, because they can always be upsold in the near future as well. Okay, so let's just say the sale has been closed, right, the prospect, let's just say it was a paid in full, right, and then customer onboarded, then they will ultimately get access to the private community, the curriculum, the course, and the coaching calls, whether that's one-on-ones, that's group calls, whatever the offer is. Okay, so once that is ultimately in place and once the prospects are onboarded, this is where you, being the offer owner, right, you have to make sure that your fulfillment is dialed in as possible. The main thing when you are the offer owner that you need to focus on is initial content, right, and is the fulfillment. That's it, right? In terms of your middle of funnel content, that's where your sales team, your operations team, that's where they're ultimately handling that for you. You being the offer owner, you have to mainly focus on these two things, right? The content and fulfillment, right? Because the content, if you're not posting content, then you're not going to get attention, right? If you don't get attention, then you're not going to have a lot of lead flow, right? Even if you're posting ads, but if you're not posting content, then it's ultimately not going to work, right? So you need to make sure the content that you're pushing out is quality-driven content. The content that you're ultimately pushing out, it actually resonates with your dream followers as well. And then obviously the middle of funnel, the sales processes, etc. That's where your sales team will ultimately handle that for you. And moving on to the fulfillment. Once they've onboarded, it is your job as the offer owner to make sure that they are actually delivering results. Why? Because you can then either do an upsell with them, right? Or main thing is getting the results and case studies, right? The more you have, the better, because this way, like, it will also showcase to other people that, okay, like, this actually works, and there's more proof as well. So the more proof that you have, the better, right? Because that way you can leverage that into your retargeting ads or even your initial ads as well. Okay, so moving down to the ascension, after all of that is dialed in, you can always see how you can ultimately upsell, right? This is ultimately the upsell mechanism. Do you feel like you can increase your price, right? Your loan to value, etc., etc. Okay, and then this just ultimately leads all the way back up to the top of funnel. Same again, you just rinse and repeat. Just to give a little breakdown as well, top of funnel content, ultimately getting the attention. Middle of funnel content, that is where the magic happens. And the bottom of funnel, that is where the sales happen. And then the fulfillment, right? The results and the delivery. Okay. So these are the exact systems that I use for my clients as well as myself. And I hope you guys found this video valuable. So if you're an e-com coach, if you're a coach that just needs help scaling your coaching business, then I have left my details in the description below. And let's have a chat. And we can jump on a quick 30 to 45 minute call. And this call is essentially just what bottlenecks that you're facing right now. So if anything, you just walk away with a free plan that you can implement in your coaching business for free. Take care, guys. Have a good one.